The acronym BRIC was coined in 2001 by Goldman Sachs chief economist Jim O'Neill to describe the emerging economies of Brazil, Russia, India and China. The term quickly became shorthand for the emerging market giants. As developing economies have sought a greater voice in managing the global economy, the acronym has developed into a partnership between the nations. In 2009, the inaugural BRICS summit was held in Russia in response to the global financial crisis. South Africa joined BRIC nations in 2010, and the group is now known as the BRICS. It's predominantly an economic partnership rather than a political alliance. Together, these countries make up 40% of the world's population. The BRICS are now building institutions to help emerging markets develop, including their own international bank based in China's commercial hub, Shanghai. The New Development Bank has $100 billion in authorized capital and aims to finance infrastructure and sustainable development projects in member states and developing countries. A $100 billion reserve fund has also been given the go-ahead by BRICS nations. Together, they're intended to provide an alternative to global financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank.
Yes, we are stomping into the second hour, 7:05 p.m. on Friday, September the 1st, 2023. September is here already. We're in the last leg of the year, folks. Really, it feels like the year just got started. It just became 2023, and now we're already in the final leg of the year. Whew, man. Welcome back to the show. This is Issues and Answers Friday, My Country with Scott Cannon here on WLTH 1370 AM. The number is 219-885-1371. That number again, 219-885-1371. Hope you guys enjoyed the Charlie Parker. As you know, I got class, okay? I have some class. Okay, I like jazz. Okay, I happen to really like jazz. Okay, yeah. One thing a very important event that I think has been overshadowed by what's been going on with Trump and what's been going on in Ukraine and obviously Hawaii and now with the hurricane. A very important event happened last week that I don't think got the type of attention that it should have. And that is that the BRICS, as the intro just talked about, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, the economic alliance BRICS, has decided to expand. Yes. With more than 40 heads of state set to travel to the event, which is the BRICS Summit in Johannesburg, the geopolitical world was observing to see if the bloc would opt to implement a growth plan. Now we know that they did, in fact, choose to do that. They are expanding their membership. The BRICS grouping has expanded for the very first time since 2010. 6 new countries are entering into this economic alliance: Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, put a pin in that, and the United Arab Emirates are joining the grouping. This is expected to have a major economic impact around the world. The new BRICS alliance will have 46% of the world's population. 46%, that's almost half the people on Earth. With over 30%, with almost 30% of the global GDP, the BRICS will become a $30.8 trillion economy. That is bigger than the economies of the United States and the European Union. Now, for context, the G7 countries that America's a part of and the other richest countries are a part of, they also are about 30% of the global GDP. So now this BRICS alliance, which is pretty soon going to encompass half or most of the world's population, will very soon also control a bigger percentage of the global GDP than the G7 as well. Now, perhaps the biggest jump will be seen in oil production. The bloc share in oil production will more than double from 20% of the world's production to 43% of the world's oil production. We all drive cars, folks. We all drive cars. Well, most of us do. This is going to be very important. 6 of the 10 top oil producers in the world are now a part of the BRICS alliance, including our friends in Saudi Arabia, our supposed friends in Saudi Arabia. To top it all off, BRICS will account for over 25% of global exports, with over 25% of and 43% of the oil output. Now, this will make BRICS an economic powerhouse that can determine the direction of global trade and oil flow. Bloomberg has forecast that BRICS could control close to 50% of the world's economy by 2050. And according to the forecast, the BRICS plus GDP could reach about 48% of the world's GDP by 2050. The economic projection and analysis were taken using the International Monetary Fund data. Now, this data used to measure the upcoming growth only took into consideration the 11 member countries that were already there. Now, if BRICS Plus continues expanding, the GDP could take the lion's share of the world's economy. There is a very big chance that this alliance will induct many more countries, because African countries and South American countries, which are growing in a rapid fashion, are all trying to join BRICS, mostly so that they can flout their nose at the United States and Western Europe. There is a high chance that the alliance will induct many more countries into the bloc. 20 other nations' applications are pending at the moment. 20 other countries. The BRICS alliance has called, now this is why, listen to this now, this is very important. The BRICS alliance is calling for the abandonment of the US dollar for international trade. Yes. BRICS itself will officially end reliance on the US dollar for global trade settlements moving forward. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa confirmed that the bloc collectively decided to abandon the US dollar with no opposition. BRICS will now continue promoting their respective local currencies for cross-border settlements and strengthening their native economies. This move will pave the way for a paradigm shift in the global economy and reshape the world's political landscape. Bilateral ties with other countries will be reworked, and the US dollar will face stiff competition in the long run. The dollar's debt factor also played a role in abandoning the USD. We will increase payment options and reduce our vulnerability, holding the dollar as reserves, says Brazil's President Lula da Silva. Now, the reason that is important, right? Once again, I've been telling you guys this since the Ukraine war started last year, that the whole world was sick and tired of being bullied by the United States. The entire world is sick of being bullied by the United States. They are sick of us and our satellite states all over Western Europe telling them that if you don't do what we say, we are going to sanction you. And now they are sanction-proofing their economies by abandoning the U.S. dollar, which is about as catastrophic of an event that could happen for all of us here in this country as possible. BRICS will also convince other developing countries to trade in their local currencies and not in the U.S. dollar. It is very possible that the U.S. dollar will slowly fade away from the international stage, making the debt crisis, ceiling crisis in America even worse. Now, I know what you're out there thinking, out in Radio Land. Okay, so what happens if the dollar uses its reserve status? Well, let's give it some context here. For centuries, the world has had what is called a reserve currency. This is the currency in which the majority of the world's international transactions are handled. Historically, these were the currencies of a series of European colonial powers, including Spain, then France, then England at one point. These empires often backed their currencies with precious metals, typically gold, in addition to the implicit backing of the state. Following World War I, the British economy struggled to regain its strength. Much of the world's gold flowed from London to New York for safekeeping and speculation in the roaring 1920s U.S. equity bull market. America's dominant role in World War II further cemented New York as the financial capital of the entire world, and the dollar, the American dollar, as its most important currency. The greenback was formally made the world's reserve currency in 1944 as a result of the Bretton Woods Agreement, a status that the pound sterling in Britain had previously had. Now, you go forward to 1971. In that year, President Richard Nixon abandons the gold standard. And from that point on, the dollar has been backed not by gold, but purely by the full faith and credit of the United States government. And since 1971, numerous people have called for an end of the American dollar as the world's reserve currency. So what you're seeing is that at least since the 1970s, we've just been winging it on a prayer. Now, like I said, many people over the years have called for an end to this because people all over the world, different countries, are sick and tired of the United States being able to lord its dollar reserve, its reserve status over everybody's head. But why has the U.S. dollar remained the world's reserve currency for so long? One is the petrodollar, the so-called petrodollar. The vast majority of the world's oil transactions occur in U.S. dollars. As the global oil trade amounts to billions of dollars per day, and every country needs energy, this creates a great deal of demand for American dollars to facilitate these transactions. Now, while oil is the most obvious example, there is a broader need for a world unit of exchange. Consider a scenario where a Brazilian farmer sells soybeans to a Japanese condiments company. It's highly unlikely that the Japanese firm would have Brazil's currency because they're in Japan. Similarly, the Brazilian grower is not going to want to accept Japanese yen in exchange for their soybeans. Thus, the logical solution is to use an intermediary, to convert yen into dollars. Buy the soybeans with dollars and then have the producer convert those dollars into their local currency. So we have our hand on every transaction. To that point, the Federal Reserve estimates that between 1999 and 2019, the American dollar accounted for 96% of international trade transactions in the Americas. 96%. 74% in Asia, and 79% around the rest of the world. Globally, banks have used dollars for approximately 60% of their non-domestic deposits and loans. Adding to this, in the foreign exchange market today, the US dollar is on one side of almost 90% of all transactions. There has been much discussion about trying to create an alternative to the US dollar. At one point, people thought it'd be the euro. But then the 2008 financial crisis happened. And a lot of political and economic events have happened in Europe that diminished the standing of the Central European currency as a world standard. Japan has its own issues with a stagnant economy and a shrinking population. China is unlikely to become a world reserve currency because of extreme capital controls that its government places on the use of the yuan. All other potential candidates are likely too small to be a reserve currency. The Swiss franc, for example, is known as a stable and well-regarded currency. However, the economy it's tied to, Switzerland, is tiny and would not be able to support the huge capital flows required of an international reserve currency. So you see now why the US dollar is so important in trade to the entire world. I know what you're thinking. What can I do about any of this? What can I do to protect myself and my family in this situation? Well, you got to stick around because I'm going to tell you when we get back. This is Issues and Answers Friday, My Country with Scott Cannon. Please stick around. We'll be right back after these.